Sundar Pichai explains the evolution of Google's founding "Don't Be Evil" motto.
It's a lot more of a nuanced view, but it underpins how we think about things.
Our company's motto, if we have one, I would say, is "Don't be evil." It's actually a good story. When we were small, we were mostly engineers. All the employees were engineers. When we hired our first business people, some of the engineers were really concerned about would that change the way we did business, and also would it change the types of products we built. And so there was an engineer named Amit who has very neat, tidy handwriting that I refer to as Patel Sans Serif, and that's his last name. And he decided that he would go and leave a note on the board for the business people because he knew they had a business meeting where they were going to be trying to sell some of Google's products. So unbeknownst to the business people, he wrote in the lower corner of the whiteboard, "Don't be evil." So in the middle of the meeting, the business people spotted it and realized it was a note from Amit about how he wanted them to conduct the meetings. And it just sort of stuck from that.
A rare Apple I is up for auction. Apple I helped spark the personal computer revolution. This particular Apple I set includes the original Apple I board.
So Steve Jobs went in to sell him some of our little boards that we built for $20. He said, no, people want to come in, they want to buy it pre-built. They want to buy the thing ready to go. It cost us $250 to build maybe, we'd sell it for $500. And then the retail price was $666.66 because I, as a mathematician, like repeating digits. And that was what it should be.
You know, it's the beginning. It's the Model T Ford. It's the Wright airplane, the first thing that was out there.
However, the Apple I is said to be 1 million times slower than today's array of iPhones, iPads and iMacs sold by the technology giant.
If you have an iPhone, you probably have 1 million times the computing power. I don't know what it is exactly, but it's grossly different. This has like 4K of memory and a very slow processor compared to anybody's phone, let alone a big computer on somebody's desk.
7 years in which Apple went from strength to strength, winning the hearts and minds of consumers all over the world. But now its co-founder and creative leader has chosen to exit the stage. Products with enormous consumer appeal that also win a place in design history. Apple staff, investors, rivals and customers are now left to wonder if Steve Jobs can ever really be replaced.
And basically it comes down to one major thing. He operates in the realm of what we would call simply the lie. That's his stock and trade. In fact, that's how Jesus identified him. He said, he is a liar. That's who he is, above and beyond anything else. And the lie that he tells was just effective when he first told it to Eve, as it is with you and I today. And it really, in a way, if I could summarize it, comes down to this. God can't be trusted. When you begin to think about all of the challenges, the difficulties and struggles that you go through, it always comes down to the question, am I going to trust God or am I not going to trust God? And what the enemy comes very powerfully next to us and just simply says, wait a minute, I don't think God can be trusted. Maybe he was in the past, maybe he will be in the future, but regarding what you're facing right now, you can't trust God. Now, there are 1,000 little tiny things that we deal with on a day-to-day basis that don't even register on a seismograph or a Richter scale. They're the kind of little earthquakes that are probably roaming around the earth and around people's lives. But then there comes these moments when there are these major dividing lines, these major moments in where we have to make a decision, and we know that our lives are going to be defined in a big way by how we react to what's in front of us. And that's really where we begin to sweat it out. If I obey God, will this prove to be, in the long run, the best decision, or will this be something that I will regret for the rest of my life? That's why Paul expressed his concern when he wrote to the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians 11. He says, I am afraid that just as Eve was deceived by the serpent's coming, your minds may somehow be led astray from devotion to Christ. You see, Paul recognized that for all of us, the case simply is that we are easily led astray. I would like to say, no, I'm sharp and perceptive and he isn't going to get me. And the more you think that, the more vulnerable you become. In fact, it is the realization that I can easily be deceived. I can easily be fooled. I can easily be tricked that really creates a level of cautiousness and prayerfulness in our life that can be really a saving grace sometimes. And yet human nature and in its inherent pridefulness always wants to have the idea that I can handle things. I can deal with this. But what he can do is he can deceive you into thinking that something that God says is good is actually bad, and something that God says is bad is actually good. It's because we're vulnerable to this because of the way that God made us. You see, when God created Adam and Eve, he created them in his image and in his likeness. We've talked about this. But this doesn't mean that you and I are an exact replica of God, thank goodness. But basically, we are a shadow reflection, or somebody said a shadowy reflection. A shadow really literally means a dark shade, a dark projection, or a dark image. And in a way, we are kind of a darkened image of God, mainly because of sin. But God originally created us to be like the moon, to be a true reflector of his light and of his brightness, never rising to the level of his glory, but nonetheless be giving evidence that there is a glorious God who is out there. That your life is designed by God to be lived in a way that says to the world and the people around you, there really is a God. Now, I don't want to put you into a guilt trip because most of us feel like, well, I don't do a very good job of reflecting God. I would just say to you, you do a lot better job than you realize. That I remember when I was in college and I had 2 roommates and I was just a new Christian, and all I can say is, only my hairdresser knew for sure. I mean, it was like I was sincere and serious about my faith, but pretty confused, didn't know what I was doing, and I look back on it with great chagrin and say, oh my goodness, what a whack job I was. But having said all of that, one of the things that shocked me was that my brother told me a couple of years later that one of my roommates had said to him, you know, when your brother became a Christian, he changed so dramatically. Now, from my perspective, I didn't see myself changing, but the fact was that Jesus was beginning to reflect in my life, and it was not really a great reflection, but it was dramatic enough that the people around me could see that something had happened. Something had transpired in my life that they couldn't identify or understand or completely comprehend. And I want you to understand that about yourself, that you are a reflector of his glory. And even though you and I see the flaws and we see the places where the mirror is, you know, we're kind of like the early Hubble, we just kind of had a distorted image, but nonetheless, there is still an image there. There's still a reflection. There's still a way that you're touching the people who you come in contact. But the thing is that how is it that we become reflectors of God's image?